Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. We're recording this episode on a Monday afternoon and we're going to reflect on United's 3-0 win against Leicester City at the weekend, and we're going to look ahead to Ruben Amorim's arrival because it's very exciting. He's arriving in Manchester today as we record. I'm joined by Tyrone Marshall for this episode. Ty was at the Leicester game. Ty, first of all, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Stephen. Very good. Spent the morning on Flight Radar, looking at flights leaving Lisbon and arriving in Manchester.
It's the most exciting part of any new arrival or a signing, isn't
Feels
it?
like a transfer
Tracking
window.
flights.
Yeah.
It's like a journalist's secret hobby. You have to be good at tracking private jets. It's very weird and very strange. That's the
It
world
is.
we live
It
in.
is.
But we did have a game of football yesterday, Ty. So we'll begin with that first. We'll talk about Ruud van Nistelrooy a bit as well before we get on to Amorim, who is officially starting work today. But to begin with, a very easy afternoon for United at Old Trafford. It was very straightforward, a 3-0 comfortable win, and it was nice for Ruud van Nistelrooy to end on a high his interim spell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as routine a win as United have had in recent memory, certainly since the start of last season, those easy wins have been very few and far between, and they've had two in the space of 4 days really this week. You know, albeit the caveat is that obviously this 2-week spell worked perfectly for Van Nistelrooy with the fixtures. Excuse me, but I mean the Pout game was very low key. It was very dull. It was only enlivened by Ahmad, but it was still routine for United. And again on Sunday, we were talking afterwards, trying to remember any chances Leicester had, and I think there was Ndidi's at 0-0, and that was probably it. And after that, it was just very comfortable. It felt like United never really got out of third gear. Certainly once they got a 2-0 lead, they kind of coasted through it, and it's what you want from United when you're playing a team of that level. And it's irrelevant now, but you look at those 4 games, and like I say, the fixtures were pretty easy. Would Ten Hag have won 3 and drawn 1? I'm not sure he would have done. And we said countless times at the back end of last season, the start of this season, when Ten Hag was in charge, that you looked at every game and could find reasons for it being a banana skin. And the greatest compliment you can pay Van Nistelrooy is that you looked at the game against Pauk and the game against Leicester and thought, yeah, they'll win that, all right. And that's the greatest change and the biggest change over the last 2 weeks.
When you think back, I made this point, I don't know if I was on the podcast with you or with Samuel, but when you think back to the Coventry game in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, the fact that we sat at Wembley before that match and looked at that as a potential banana skin, that just says it all. You're right. There's something really nice about cruising through these games without being troubled, because let's be honest, without being disrespectful to your Leicesters or your Pauks, United should be breezing past these sides. So it was nice to see. Ahmad was a bright spark again. Ty was fantastic in the Europa League last week, wasn't he? He was really the standout performer. And that opening goal, his involvement in that, he almost kind of sold a dummy, didn't he? I think he created a moment of hesitation for the defenders, Leicester defenders, and he played a beautiful back heel to Bruno Fernandes, who lashed home. That was a really, really great goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was like Ahmad somehow just slowed the game down and slowed the ball coming to him down. And yeah, it was quite strange to watch because the ball was rolling towards him, and it was kind of a back heel at the last moment. There was no suggestion it was coming, and like I say, it was almost done in slow motion, like everything slowed down. But a brilliant touch, and we've said this countless times, and it was noticeable when he got back into the team. It's Arsenal last season, at the end of last season, wasn't it? His dribbling is unbelievable in terms of his close control. The ability to keep the ball between his feet and keep it away from defenders is fantastic. There was one run early in the first half against Christensen and then Fatawu, and Ahmad it didn't look like he had a pace advantage on Christensen, but he dribbled 20, 30 yards with him just because of that close control, and Christensen just couldn't get his foot in. You know, he couldn't do anything to get the ball off him, and I put in a blog post. It kind of reminds me of Mohamed Salah in a little bit, and that his, Salah's very quick as well, but his dribbling is the control in his dribbling for Salah is brilliant. A lot of players, when they dribble, they're as liable to lose the ball as they are to go past someone. It's they're never quite sure what they're doing. It's great to watch, but there's not always control to it. With Salah, there is always great control to his dribbling. Defenders are worried about tackling him because he keeps the ball so tightly controlled with that left foot. And with Ahmad, you can kind of see the same sort of thing. He protects the ball really well when he's dribbling. He protects the ball really well when he's got it. And there is certainly a player to work there. He's been fantastic these last 2 games, and I think there's definitely some frustration there. I think that somehow he fell behind Anthony towards the end of Ten Hag's time.
Ty, isn't that a scandal how he was being overlooked for Anthony? Ten Hag was picking Anthony over him.
I know.
Even in the Fenerbahce game, with Anthony coming on the pitch before Amad. I mean, it's disgrace, really, isn't it, in hindsight?
I mean, it was absolutely bizarre.
It
was absolutely bizarre. And I think Ten Hag said afterwards it was rewarding training performances, but Amad's the one performing in games, never mind training. I mean, the strange thing with Anthony at Fenerbahce is that he was actually all right for 5 minutes before he got that injury. He made some kind of impact, but I mean, Amad is he's head and shoulders the better player than Anthony. He's miles better than him. He's miles more influential than him. And yeah, just one of many, I think, decisions that we look at towards the end of the Ten Hag era and think, how did that happen? And it certainly can't happen again, because I think Amad's gone from maybe fourth choice winger in the final weeks of Ten Hag to now maybe first choice, depending on how Amorim is going to set that team up and what positions he's going to play. But I think his profile really does fit the new manager.
He's had a really interesting season, hasn't he? Because he started the campaign in the starting team. Then his involvement was kind of reduced, and the last 2 games he's worked his way back in, and now feels like he's got momentum just in time for Amorim's arrival. So it's going to be fascinating, as you say, to see how he is used under the new manager, or the new head coach, I should say. I thought it was interesting as well. Van Nistelrooy made some early subs, didn't he, in that second half? You rarely see a manager make substitutions so early, if obviously they aren't injuries, in the second half. Was it the 57th minute that Diallo and Rashford were taken off? However, obviously, I think what the point you were about to say, Ty, he was trying to get the players on before that, wasn't he?
Yeah, I would say from about 50 minutes they were getting ready. So he made that call within the first 5 minutes of the second half, and it is very unusual. And we were kind of looking at it thinking, is there an injury? Is one of them an injury? But it seemed they were both tactical and a very brave call. And you wonder whether it was maybe he didn't want the humiliation of subbing them off at half-time and making the changes at half-time. I don't think either had a great game, particularly. It seems Rashford and Garnacho have kind of lost their way a little bit at the wrong possible time. And obviously Garnacho finished the game really well with that goal. Diallo's been poor for most of the season, I think, and there's question marks over his form. But it was a really bold and brave call. And it's the type of thing, we might get onto Van Nistelrooy's future, but it's the type of call that shows there is some potential there as a head coach or a manager or whatever he wants to do. It was noticeable first half as well. He had Diallo and Amad in front of him. He was on Diallo's case quite a bit about positioning, and he was constantly shouting Amad and kind of waving his right arm backwards as if telling him, get back to the touchline. He wanted Amad to stay really wide, to stretch the play. Leicester's defence was obviously narrowing when the ball was on the other side of the pitch, and Van Nistelrooy was constantly telling Amad, stay wide, get wide, isolate Christensen, stay in that space and you'll get the ball. And it was good coaching, because the more often he got to that space, the more often he got the ball, and he was United's most dangerous player with the ball. So yeah, certainly some interesting and brave calls from Van Nistelrooy. And yeah, the substitution was one of them. Like you say, it's when you look at that on Soccer Base or BBC Sport, whatever, in years to come, and you're like, 2 substitutions, 57 minutes, you'd be like, yeah, fair enough. But like I say, it was before the 50th minute, I would say, when he made that call, because it was around then they were getting stripped and ready. And there was, I think, during that period, Leicester got a free kick about 30 yards out. I think it was the one that they made a total mess of. And if it was an injury, then he would have made both substitutions then. The fact that he didn't showed that it wasn't an injury, and that partly contributed to why they spent 5 or 6 minutes stood there in the kit waiting to come on.
It was a brave decision, but very understandable, wasn't it? As you say, when you looked at those 2 performances from Rashford and Diallo, and you're right, I've been really, really disappointed with Diallo this season. It's very consistent last year, obviously in a struggling team, but he looks a shadow of himself, doesn't he? Really, and I think his confidence is taking a few knocks. I believe when you actually watch him, his body language and how he's using the ball isn't particularly the same, I don't think, either. And now with Amorim coming in, you've got a choice there, perhaps, between, well, if Luke Shaw gets back to fitness, that's a big if, isn't it? You've got a choice between Mazraoui and Diallo, potentially, and you'd have Mazraoui starting over Diallo every day of the week at the moment, wouldn't you? Yeah,
I think you probably would. I mean, I've got to be honest, neither particularly strike me as wing-backs. So that's going to be the interesting thing. I mean, if anything, you'd say Diallo is maybe...
Does Mazraoui not strike you as a wing-back?
I don't know. I feel like he's more of a possession fullback. We've seen him play in midfield a lot. We've seen him come inside and come into midfield a lot. And he strikes me more as that kind of inverted fullback than a wing back. And, maybe he'll prove me wrong. Maybe that's purely because that's what he's done for United so often this season that I'm just not seeing it. But he looks to me like more of that kind of fullback than someone who's going to be bombing up and down the flank. Maybe he will be, but like I say, I don't see either playing as a left wing back. I think Amorim's likely to want a left footer there, which is another dilemma. But yeah, at the moment, you probably have Mazraoui ahead of Diallo. You're right; his confidence does look to have taken a knock. He's playing pretty poorly. I've questioned it a few times this season that the work rate just doesn't look to be there, and I think that's probably to do with that lack of confidence, that he's just questioning things in games. You go back to the Tottenham's first goal where he just jogged behind Brennan Johnson, and when Johnson scored, Diallo did put his hand up to acknowledge it, but I still think it's crazy to be running behind a dangerous winger like that and to never think I need to get in front of my man here. And if there's, from what I've seen of Sporting under Amorim, if there's one thing the wing backs need to do, it is run forward and run back and then run forward again and then run back again. And at the moment, I don't see that with Diallo. I don't see that work rate as being there and that energy as being there. And perhaps that's a psychological knock on from the fact that he's not in great form. Maybe under Amorim, if results pick up, that will change. But I do think that's going to be an interesting battle because they've both played almost every game this season. But I don't think that can continue if Amorim's going to play this 3-4-2-1, which he seems pretty likely to do. So yeah, I mean, on current form, I think you'd have to have Mazraoui in ahead of Diallo.
Yeah, I think Mazraoui's just a very, technically exceptional player.
Yeah.
And I know all professional footballers are technically brilliant, but he's I use the word technician, I guess, with Mazraoui. He really is, isn't he? Which is why I think he could. I know you're saying he comes in, he's inverted, he comes in midfield, he's very comfortable in those areas, but I could see him having just as much success as a wing back as well. So it'd be interesting to see how much quality he's kind of got in those areas. So again, really positive from Mazraoui. Let's move on to Garnacho's goal, Ty. A fantastic finish. He obviously came on from the bench, as we just discussed. The ball from Eriksen was almost the pre-assist, wasn't it? Because you talk about assists, sometimes it's the pass before the assist that matters. And Eriksen's ball to Fernandes was outstanding. Fernandes finds Garnacho, finishes really well. And the interesting point, I guess, is the quote from Fernandes after the game when he discusses Garnacho's celebration. And he said he didn't really celebrate with his usual gusto because he's perhaps thinking at the moment that he's not got the faith from all the fans. That was actually a reference, I presume you've seen it yourself, to an exchange with Garnacho and a fan before Pauk. And the fan basically says, well, I say fan loosely, something along the lines of, why aren't you need to pass better, or you're going to score today, something like that anyways. Garnacho was understandably irritated, and that's kind of the reaction. It was sad to see that because Garnacho's loved by match-going fans and proper fans, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I think content creator is probably a more apt word than fan. And it was bizarre given, Garnacho's not been faultless this season, but certainly in terms of end product, he's more productive than he's been at any point in his United career. And you still got to go back to the fact that he played so much, 38 successive starts last season, when at the start of that run, he'd never played more than 2 successive games. It was a frightening work rate. I don't think it's any surprise that with a young winger who played that often, you see moments where he's brilliant and then the odd game where he's slipping from those standards. And just a bizarre thing to do. Fair play for Garnacho to having a bit of a dig back and good captaincy from Fernandes to raise it. And I think, if it is an issue that's preying on Garnacho's mind, I think he's got the support of everyone who goes to Old Trafford on a regular basis. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I think the fans all adore him. They see what a talent he is. That was a brilliant goal. Like I say, he's had games recently, I think the last couple especially, where he's kind of dropped from that standard, but he's a 20-year-old winger. That is going to happen. This is what he can do. And I think 7 goals and 4 assists now already this season. And that's a great return. And I wrote at the start of the season when he's playing so well, that's what you need to see from him now. He should be getting 15 to 20 goals this season. That's the obvious next level for him to go at. As good as he was, as undroppable as he became last season, he still needed to add more end product to his game. And these days, wingers, wide players, they've got to do more than just run down the wing and get crosses in. They've got to score goals, and especially at United when neither striker's scoring. And I think that's where Rashford, Garnacho, Ahmad have got to improve. They've all got to get 15 this season. That's what you see. Look at the options Liverpool have got. Look, City, what City used to do, they've kind of changed now under Erling Haaland. look at Arsenal last season, they have players who share the goals out. They don't have a centre forward who's scoring every goal. And I've compared Xerxes to kind of Firmino a couple of times on this podcast. I think it's probably harsh on Firmino that the way Xerxes playing at the moment, but you saw it.
I think Xerxes got better teeth personally than Firmino.
You saw it with Xerxes at one point yesterday that he dropped really deep and sprayed a good pass out wide. But if he's going to survive here and he's going to play that position long term, you've got to have wingers that are contributing 40 goals a season, and that's what they need to do. And I think in Garnacho, we're seeing now a player that should be getting 15 minimum a season, and having already got 7 by mid-November. I think he should be targeting 20 this season for sure. And like I say, as a 20-year-old winger, it's inevitable there's going to be bad games in there and bad moments in there. But I think he certainly does have the faith of every match going fan, really.
I think it is probably quite difficult for young players in 2024 because when they're growing up, they're in such a social media age. You've obviously got a young kid yourself, Ty, and you'll have that challenge, won't you, in the years to come, where you're kind of moderating social media. And these kids now are so chronically online that you'd expect them to kind of shut out this noise, but it must be difficult. And they probably do see a bit of it, the criticism from some areas, and that can, I imagine, be pretty difficult to deal with. It's a different era now, isn't it, to when, for example, Sir Alex Ferguson managed, and I mean, he had different challenges himself, didn't he, with players perhaps going on the drink. But it's a different world now, completely different world. We'll move on then, and we'll briefly touch on Casemiro. I thought he was worth mentioning as well. I know you've just a lunge piece on him, because before we'll come on to Ruud to end the part, Casemiro got another great reception at the end of the game. His name's been chanted in the last few games, hasn't it? It wasn't just on Sunday. And he's had this kind of revival. He's come back into the team. He got his head down after he's hooked against Liverpool, and he's forced his way back into the first team and into the starting team. Van Nistelrooy defended him, didn't he, after his first game as interim boss, and he launched like a really passionate defence of Casemiro. But fair play to Casemiro, Ty, because I did not see this coming.
No, I didn't either, to be honest. I mean, I don't think it's any secret in the summer that United would have been happy to sell him, and the only reason he stayed is because there was no market for him. None of the Saudi clubs showed an interest. No one in Europe was going to show an interest on his 300 grand plus a week salary with 2 years to go. That was a major issue for United in the summer. There's a big reason they didn't do more business and get Ugarte in earlier. And then you look at the Liverpool, it's Liverpool first half at a point when Ugarte has just signed for the club. And I think we all thought then that this is the end. This is the end for him at the very highest level. He might play against Barnsley. He might play in the odd Carabao Cup and Europa League game, but he looked like he was done for at the highest level. But fair play, it has been a remarkable renaissance. He's looked an awful lot better. He spoke in the mix zone yesterday, and he was asked pretty much first question about his own form, and it was quite a spiky response about. I think he was asked if you improved this season, and he basically said, "Well, everyone can see, can't they?" He was judge it for yourself kind of thing, and he said, "I've only had one bad game against Liverpool, and everyone was bad." And it's fair enough. He has been an awful lot better this season. He's always had that strong relationship with the fans. I think that first season he was such a leader, such an emotional leader on the pitch as well, that the fans took to him and Martinez really, really quickly, and that kind of drifted a bit last season when he was having his struggles. But he does look back to his best now. And I wrote in the piece that we did with him that the one question you had was how much of this was his legs just giving up on him, that he just didn't have it physically anymore, and how much was it down to Ten Hag's system and the lack of protection he had in midfield, the fact he was just so isolated at times. And it's felt like we've kind of got our answer recently, that he's looked a lot better with Ugarte next to him. He's looked a lot better in a more condensed structure under Van Nistelrooy. And there's definitely something to go at there. And I think, Van Nistelrooy's legacy is rebuilding confidence, 3 wins in 4. You look at it tactically and you say there's not a lot there for Amorim to work at. But I think that midfield partnership, Ugarte and Casemiro started all 4 games under Van Nistelrooy, and they look ideal for the 2 central midfielders in Amorim's usual system. I think that they've really complemented each other well. Casemiro spoke about that yesterday. They can both win the ball back. Casemiro's passing is excellent, and was a really underrated part of his game, I think. Something we don't really see at Real Madrid, but we've always seen at United. And with Ugarte offering a bit more energy next to him, I think they look a really good partnership at the moment. And yeah, it has been quite the renaissance. And at the moment, you'd say that they're pretty much 2 of the first names on the team sheet, I think, for that game at Ipswich. If Amorim's going to play that 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, whatever you want to call it, then I think in the central midfield positions, you've got to go with those two.
I'd probably have Manu in over Casemiro. I mean, I said this, I think, last week. For all, I've been really impressed with Casemiro, and I've given him his dues because he has really been excellent the last few weeks. I mean, I think you'd still agree with us that he should be sold coming up to the summer. Would you? I mean, his profile, he is on the downgrade. I think he still deserves credit for this kind of spell that he's having. But in the medium to long term, I don't think he should be at United, personally.
No, I think he's going to have a year left at the end of this summer, isn't he? He's going to be 33 in the summer. You'd probably say it's a good time to go, but I think Eriksen's quite likely to go. I think certainly at least one of those two needs to depart. I mean, they've both actually started the season really well, given they both could have left in the summer. But you certainly wouldn't give them both new contracts. I mean, Eriksen will probably go on a free. If you do want to keep Eriksen for another year, then I think you let Casemiro go. But yeah, I would still say it's probably a good time. But again, it depends on what sort of market there is for a 33-year-old on 300 grand come the summer. But I think
he's almost playing himself back into the shop window, isn't he? It
quite
felt
possibly,
like no one was going to touch Casemiro last summer because it was just so high profile how bad he was.
Yeah.
And that can only help, can't it, approaching the end of the season if he continues in this vein of form.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's certainly be more interest. You'd probably get some interest from Italy. I think Turkey looks an obvious potential location. Fenerbahce and Galatasaray have become ideal homes for players of kind of that experience and that ilk can pay good money as well because of the tax rate over there. So that's certainly a possibility. But I still think at the moment, when Mainu's back fit, I think we'll probably want to see him in there. But I think I know United fans are very defensive on it, but I still think there's improvement to come from Manu out of possession, as good as he is on the ball. And I think maybe if he's alongside Ugarte, that will free him up to play forward and get forward a bit more. And I think he will probably get his way back in the team. But certainly, while he's recovering and certainly once he's back fit, I can see him having a couple of games on the bench and coming off the bench before he does get his place back from Casemiro.
Yeah, I'd say the same about Manu as you kind of framed it on Casemiro, where I didn't think Ten Hag's system was helping Manu a lot of the times. Yeah. And that was kind of exacerbated at the start of this season where he had maybe a few mistakes creeping into his game and probably wasn't at his 100% best. We'll end this part then. We obviously need to talk about Van Nistelrooy time. Come on, the elephant in the room. As he walked out yesterday, it did look very much like a farewell. He's got such a brilliant connection with the fans. He's adored, hugely popular with the players as well. There is now the question around whether he stays on as part of Ruben Amorim's staff. That could be unlikely because he's bringing his own coaches. Should we just discuss really how we assess his interim tenure to begin with then? Because he's done more than steady the ship, hasn't he? There is a kind of a sense of optimism now that was lacking when Ten Hag was in charge. Everyone was down in the doldrums. It was all a bit depressing. And Van Nistelrooy's come in and he's given everyone a bit of a lift. And as an interim manager, he's done all you can ask for, really. He's been kind of perfect for that kind of caretaker role for 4 games.
Yeah, he has. I mean, like I say, the fixtures were perfect. The fact that all 4 were at Old Trafford, 3 of them were, essentially gimmies, and then you get a decent draw with Chelsea. I think the fixtures were ideal for him, but he's lifted the mood. He's got results. He's improved confidence. So I think he hands it over in a good place, really. Like you say, the feel around the place and the mood around the place is much better. The atmosphere towards the end yesterday was fantastic. I think he leaves, and I think he is likely to leave, but I think he leaves with the gratitude of the supporters. Definitely, it was great to see that relationship kind of rekindled, more of a farewell than he got in 2006, even if it wasn't confirmed on Sunday. He stood in front of the Stretford end, right in front of the Stretford end again for a while, clapping them and beating his chest and waved to all 4 stands as he left. And he's definitely had an impact. And you just listen to players talk about him. The players talk about him really positively, and you can see that they all like him and they all respect him. And there is, there's something there. And I think if he does go, I think he's, he got the United job at a point when he was strongly in the frame for the Burnley job. And I think now, 4 months on, he's going to leave United, and with due respect to Burnley, he's going to get a better job than Burnley. So for him, this has worked out pretty well. And whether he had that on his mind or not, and obviously he's never going to admit that, I think we all certainly said as soon as he was appointed this summer, there's your interim manager. And if we're thinking it, I'm sure there was a part of him that must have thought, yeah, maybe, I'm in a good position here
It was so
if
obvious,
things don't improve. It was very obvious, yeah.
So obvious, yeah.
And, I think that spell at the club has done him some good, because there's some big name players talking very positively about him. He's got good results. He's been in the headlines. So for him and for United, I think it's definitely been a really good 2 weeks.
I could completely understand why Amorim would want a clean break from the old regime, and which would obviously mean Van Nistelrooy leaving. But there's something inside us that just kind of wants him to stick around for the rest of the season, kind of act as that conduit between the players and the new staff, kind of help the transition and help him settle at the club, and then perhaps leave after that. Could that be a compromise, or do you just think, look, let's have a clean break? Thanks, Ruud. You've done a tremendous job in your 4 games. Pack your bags and the new era will begin.
Yeah, I think because he's had such a high-profile role under Ten Hag and now a high-profile role as interim manager, to go back to being maybe 4th in line, 5th in line as coach and putting the cones out, I just don't think it's going to work, really.
And he wouldn't do that.
And he wouldn't want to do that. It's going to look like a demotion for him. So in a way, I don't think it's in the interests of either for it to happen. I think Amorim's quotes last night made it pretty clear that he was going to go. He could have said he was going to keep him, and he just said, "Legend of the club. I will talk to him. I will talk to him. Then I would explain my decision." And it's kind of, I think that strongly hints that he's going to tell him in person that he's not a part of the staff. But I'm sure Van Nistelrooy's clever enough as well to know that that's the case. And like you said, it certainly looked like a farewell yesterday. And to have a high profile role as an assistant, you need to be on totally the same wavelength as the manager. And we just don't know whether Amorim is or not. And, I think it's pretty clear that most of those coaches are going to go. I think it's clear Rene Hacker's going to go. I think Jelly-Ten Ruvalar looks like he's going to go. Yeah, you presume Andreas Jorgensen maybe will go. I think Fletcher's probably got a good chance to stay in it, I guess, given that link with the academy there. And, he kind of is the coach at the moment who comes and puts the cones out and things like that. So I think he's probably of a level where you'd say there's a benefit to keeping him, that link with the players, that link with the academy. The rest maybe you're going to go, given he's bringing so many. He's bringing his own goalkeeping coach. He's bringing 3 first-team coaches with him. It's going to be a lot of staff that he's bringing with him. So I think you've got to expect that there's going to be a pretty big clear out.
It would have been rude for Van Nistelrooy not to have had a good farewell on Sunday, so it was good to see. We'll leave it there for part 1. We've got a moment for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the podcast. Now let's get stuck into Ruben Amorim chat time, because as we alluded to in the opening segment, we've been tracking flights. He's on the plane. He's coming to Manchester. Bless him. It's a bit rainier and colder than Lisbon. He oversaw his final game in charge of Sporting on Sunday night. They won 4-2 against Braga. They were 2-0 down at half-time. Came back to win 4-2. So his farewells go. That's pretty special. He was mobbed by all his players. He seems like a really interesting guy, doesn't he? When you hear him speak in his press conferences, he handles himself brilliantly. He speaks exceptional English, and that's going to help him a lot in his new job.
Yeah, it really is. It's exciting times, and like I say, it's kind of the perfect farewell. And I was an insight into the mundanity of my Monday mornings, but I was talking to another dad outside the school gates this morning about him, and talking about the game last night and mentioning, like, when they scored that 3rd goal, the fact that all his players mobbed him. And we'd kind of been saying it was the one thing, or one of the things, certainly maybe the biggest thing that Ten Hag was missing, that as much as the players respected him, and we didn't see that charisma a lot, the players didn't see that charisma a lot. He didn't hold a room. He didn't have that big personality. He's more, he was more of an old school headmaster type, wasn't he? And I said, I can't envisage any scenario where a team scores a goal and runs over and jumps all over Ten Hag. He doesn't strike me as someone who will ever really have that relationship with players, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But
I'm trying to think of any instances. Diallo ran off the bench. Was it in the FA Cup final? There was a few who kind of had that relationship with him. All the South American contingent didn't.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, I don't think did.
You don't really. I mean, I guess the closest you'd see was Martinez and Anthony dancing with him
Yeah.
on the pitch after the Carabao Cup win, which is something I did at Ajax. And then it was Martinez again at the cup final, wasn't it, that jumped on his back at the final whistle. And that's about it. You didn't really see, and it's not like Sporting players were mobbing Amorim every week, and maybe it's just an easy comparison, but you don't get the impression that Ten Hag engenders that same kind of unity, that same feeling. He never felt like a manager who was going to carry people with him purely on the force of his personality, like Amorim does, like Jurgen Klopp did, like maybe Hansi Flick at Barcelona is doing, Guardiola does to a certain degree. You never really got the impression that Ten Hag was there. And I remember on the first speaking to one of the players on the first pre-season tour, off the record, and they said, I was saying, what's he like with you guys? Because he's quite standoffish with us. And they said it's exactly the same. And they said every conversation, it feels like he's testing you. And, I know a lot of the players find it very awkward to speak to him and have any kind of small talk with him. And it was all business. It was all professional. And that's why I describe him as kind of that headmasterly type. But with Amorim, it's totally different, isn't it? He's a lot younger. I think he'll relate to the players a lot more. It doesn't matter, but he's a lot cooler, isn't he? It just feels like the players are going to relate to him. He's got that charisma. He can clearly hold a room. He's a great talker. And hopefully he's a good coach as well. And I think that combination, it's a very different profile to what United have appointed previously. I don't think they've ever appointed, certainly since, in these 11 years, they've not appointed anyone that was kind of the young, up-and-coming manager of their time who had that kind of charisma and personality. So it is exciting times. And like you say, just the way they signed off as well, it feels like classic Amorim, that total belief in what he does, that total belief from the players, that unity, a great way for it to end at Sporting. And it just kind of makes it even more exciting for United to see that.
He's got a fantastic head of hair, doesn't he? United are going from having a very bold manager to thick locks, isn't it? So I'm going to tell him that when I'm in his next press conference for the first time. I say, Ruben, your hair's brilliant, mate. What shampoo do you use? Look, he's going to bring around 5 coaches, we think, as we said on the plane. There's a brilliant quote about Carlos Fernandez, where Amorim was discussing his career and kind of how he's come up with his own coaches, because Fernandez and is it Diallo Candido followed him from Braga to Sporting. I've definitely butchered that pronunciation. And Amorim said, look, if I'm Sir Bobby Robson, then Fernandez is my Jose Mourinho. I mean, that's a fantastic quote, isn't it? He was never not going to come to the club with his own coaches. It would have been asking for trouble. Once you've had success with that coaching team, you're going to bring them to United with you, aren't you? It would have been a disaster and just the wrong thing to do from the onset if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, and I think every managerial ticket these days comes with a lot of staff. Really, that's generally just the way it goes. You recruit a head coach or a manager and expect them to bring staff with you. I think that's the case pretty much everywhere. It's very rare you appoint a manager and he comes and works with a totally new set of staff. And it's football has changed so much from the days when Fergie would change his assistant every few years, when he would just do when he would be that manager, almost the director of football type, and the coaches were on the training ground doing the coaching, and the coaching was about crossing the ball and heading it and improving the players. Now the coaching is so structural in terms of what's going to happen during a game. It's so like, moving players about by inches compared to where the ball is going to be, that you need to have the coaching staff who are all seeing the game in exactly the same way. It's not about, I think there was a quote, I think it was Mick Phelan the day in an interview that said, when he first joined Fergie's staff and said, what do I do? And he was like, you're a coach, go and coach them. And that just wouldn't happen these days. It's unthinkable now that you'd get Amorim coming in and keeping all of Ten Hag's staff and telling them, right, go on, just go and do your coaching. Coaching. Every coaching session, every training session is planned in minute detail as to what the team are aiming to get out of it and what they can put into action that weekend. And to do that, you need a staff that are totally on the same wavelength. And it takes time to build up those relationships. So it's far quicker just to bring the staff that you've already got those relationships with. So yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, especially when he's clearly got a very set way of playing and a set structure that he likes. There's no point coming in and telling Hacker and Van Nistelrooy and Jorgensen, who've never played a back three before, go out and coach the players in this, show them how to play in a back three. You just bring your own men to do it when you're all singing on the same hymn sheet and you know each other so well that I think it makes perfect sense. And it's a big part probably of where the game's changed in the last 20 years, that nowadays, when you bring in a manager, you don't just bring in a manager, you're bringing in all his staff as well, and all the staff that you did have are pretty much going.
He was asked about his style of play in the press conference after last night's win against Braga, and he said, "We don't have a lot of time to train, so I have to show something that I know very well. You can take whatever you want from that." That's a little summary from his quotes. But that kind of suggests that he will roll out his system and preferred style straight away, doesn't it, Ty? And I think that's what he has to do. No messing around, get straight in there. Obviously, it's the international break, so the players, the majority of them will come back in the second week. But he's still going to have players to work with when he gets his visa approved, we should add, because he's currently, as things stand, not allowed to coach on grass, is he? He's allowed to go in meetings at Carrington, etc., and speak with staff, but he's not allowed to be on grass. But we need to see that. Just get your fingerprints all over the team, convey your vision and implement your philosophy, because that's what we're banged on about with Ten Hag. We just wanted to see a distinct style in what he was doing, and in the last 18 months, you just could not see that. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, it was. And that was maybe the biggest criticism you could hold up to Ten Hag, that even at the end, after 128 games, I think you still weren't really sure what his philosophy was. It never really took off at United. And now they've got someone who clearly does have a very defined philosophy. And I think it's pretty clear he is going to stick with that back three. It's going to be fascinating to see how it works. But it is what the team has needed, what the squad has needed. You never sensed, I mean, I've used this analogy so many times on this podcast under Ten Hag, but you look at all the top teams and you kind of envisage Tottenham under Postecoglou as much of a shambles as they can be at times. City under Pep, Liverpool, Arsenal under Arteta. You look at them and you think, I can see how they, you close your eyes and you can imagine how they want to score their perfect goal, the goal that defines them. And you look at United and I could never work that out. And I think it was the Tottenham game last year when they drew 2-2. And I think I was on holiday at the time and I was watching it at home. And Gary Neville said that you look at United players and they don't know where the next pass is. They always have to take a touch and lift their head up to see where the teammates are. And other teams don't do that. Like I say, the coaching is so hands-on these days that you kind of know. When you get the ball, you know where your next pass is because you know where your teammates should be. You know what your patterns of play are. And at United under Ten Hag, it just felt from the second season onwards that those patterns of play never became clear. They never became second nature to the players. And it was like, I've got the ball, head up, who's where. You don't get that at other clubs because they've got those clearly defined structures, those clearly defined patterns of play, clearly defined ways of playing out from the back that when it gets into the midfielder, where do you go? Do you whip it right? Do you play it back? Is it a little flick? It's second nature to everyone. And that never really happened under Ten Hag. And I think it probably will happen under Amorim. And that's going to be a big area for improvement. It's going to be fascinating to see. It's going to take a bit of time. But I said in my match piece yesterday that, I don't think any United team sheet is going to be as eagerly anticipated and as poured over in as much detail as that one at Ipswich in a couple of weeks, just to see who's on it and then who is going to play where.
And the fixtures come thick and fast in the winter, don't they? So it really is going to be interesting how it's going to develop. What do you think Amorim's priorities are then to immediately hit the ground running? I mean, if we talk about individual players, Ugarte is being obviously discussed quite a bit because of the relationship he had with Amorim at Sporting Lisbon. He played some of his best football probably of his career at Sporting under Amorim. He's been a bit of a mixed bag this season, hasn't he, Ugarte? Because he hasn't probably made the start that he would have hoped for, but there has been clear promising signs in some performances. In some games, he's looked a bit off the pace. I'm thinking his 2 Premier League starts. I think he struggled a little bit against Chelsea, but to be fair, Chelsea's midfield ran the game in that match. So is solving Ugarte, well, solving's probably a bit harsh, but helping Ugarte back to that form has to be his priority, probably, Ty. And then we've talked about Diallo and the wing-back areas, and clearly the wing-back area is going to be key to how he plays. So they're just 2 things that spring to my mind immediately.
Yeah, I think Ugarte is definitely improving. He did have a slow start. It was pretty clear he didn't have Ten Hag's trust. It was pretty clear he wasn't Ten Hag's man. I think, you go back to that Tottenham defeat when he started, and then 2 games after that, when it felt like this was end of day stuff, that Ten Hag was fighting for his future, and he didn't get off the bench at Porto, and he didn't get off the bench at Villa. And I think that made it pretty clear that Ten Hag didn't have any faith in him at the moment at all, and obviously wasn't his number one target for that position. Van Nistelrooy's changed that very quickly by starting him every week. He looks to have, I think he's almost improved as every game has gone on. I thought he was pretty good yesterday. He's winning the ball back well. Like I say, I like the look of that partnership with Casemiro. I think they're complementing each other really well. There's the links with Amorim. I think he played 80 odd games under Amorim at Sporting. So, you know, if you're going to bring your own system, there's a plug and play straight away that you play Ugarte because he gets it and he can help others get it. And then after that, I think, you know, centre back long term when Yoro's back, you've got 3 top quality centre backs. I mean, De Ligt's form's been improving as well. De Ligt, Martinez, and Yoro is a really good back 3. The questions are wing backs and then in attack, really. I mean, I think Højlund is going to be the starting centre forward, but I thought he was really poor again yesterday, is struggling for form at the moment. You're going to play Fernandes as one of the 2 behind him, and then who do you play as the other one? Because at the moment, you'd be looking at Ahmad, Rashford and Garnacho, and I think you probably want at least 2 of them in the team, to be honest. So you do wonder whether he'd look at Ahmad as a left wing back or something like that. And I think, you know, what United need to get in position is that we're not, you know, we had this discussion on Friday's podcast, I think, and Ahmad, Rashford and Garnacho, even if only one plays, fine, the other 2 are on the bench. But that's what's happening. You go out to Liverpool's attacking options. I mean, one of Gakpo or Diaz is on the bench every week. Núñez is on the bench pretty much every week. No one's mentioning it because the team are doing well. The players who play are scoring. When they come on, they're scoring. And it's not really a talking point. And it's a talking point at United at the moment because the team are doing so badly. And you're like, oh, those players all need to play. But in reality, they don't. And if this team gets back to good form and they're in top 4 and 2 of Rashford, Garnacho and Ahmad are on the bench every week, then it's just considered good depth. And then they'll start in Europe or they'll start in the Cup. And I think at the moment, we may be over-analysing that just because of the fact that this is a team that's 13th in the league and 15th in Europe. And, you know, you look at that and you think you want all those players playing. In reality, you want United to be in the top 4 and all those players aren't playing because it's a good sign of squad depth. But I think it is going to be interesting early on who plays where. Because, like we say, I think that when he picks that team at Ipswich, I think for me, it's going to be the wing backs. Who's he picking as wing backs? And is he picking 2 natural fullbacks, or is he throwing a winger in there like Ahmad and saying, "Go on, show me what you've got as a wing back"?
I mean, it's a very good point you make about kind of the squad rotation. It's something I hadn't thought about. I mean, we pour over it so much, don't we? And that's kind of a job, I suppose, to kind of pick it apart on a podcast and offer analysis. But City and Liverpool, the best 2 teams in the last 8 years, maybe, it's what they do, don't they? They've just got the strength in depth, and it's insane. Yeah. And it's never really a talking point because, as you say, the players come on the pitch and score. Come on then, to end the podcast, who's the best wing back to play in the Premier League? Victor Moses?
I was going to say Marcus Alonso.
They're very niche, aren't they, wing backs? Like for a genuine out-and-out wing back, it's a very unique role, and they've got kind of unique skill sets.
I mean, Alonso felt like Alonso was never a left winger and was a pretty useless left back. He was just like, if he was on Football Manager, it'd be LWB, wouldn't he? And that's it. There'd be no other position.
But he was underrated, wasn't he, as a wing back, Alonso? I used to have him in my fantasy
phenomenal.
Team.
He was fantasy gold dust, wasn't he? Because he was so good at getting in the box and scoring goals and creating assists, and he had the energy to kind of run back and do his defensive work. He felt like a perfect wing back. I mean, you look now at someone United were linked with in the summer in Frimpong at Leverkusen, who plays in another play. You know, Alonso uses that back 3 at Bayer Leverkusen generally. Certainly did last season. And you look at Frimpong, he's probably an ideal right wing back. But in the Premier League,
he's almost evolved into a winger now, hasn't he, Frimpong?
He has
his career as obviously a defender, and he's moved up the pitch so much now, where you actually see him as a right winger, not when back anymore.
When Leverkusen play a back 4 now, he tends to play as a winger or second striker at times. He's so far up the pitch. You know, I think at Liverpool last week, I was mostly watching City, but from what I could see on that game on the tablet, it looked like he was playing. It looked like a back 4, and he was almost playing as a very high up winger rather than a right wing back. But I think he could still do it. I mean, the other one of potential is Alphonso Davies, who's out of contract, who I'm pretty sure will probably end up at Real Madrid, but he could do it as well. But in terms of Premier League, I mean, there's so few teams that have had long-term success with the back 3 in the Premier League that there doesn't feel like there's many there. And I mean, it should be said that United do have someone with great experience of playing wing-back and playing wing-back very successfully in Luke Shaw. He was a great wing-back for England. He was in the team of the Euros in 2021, playing mostly as a wing-back. So I know he's never fit. He's not played since February. He's only just started training again. I think he's probably a month, at a guess, off being involved in first team matters, given he was only back on the grass at the back end of last week. And United are going to take it very cautiously. But, on his best, if he gets back to his best form and his best fitness, and I know at the moment we're kind of in that zone where everyone's given up on Shaw and written him off, but he could very easily end the season as sole in that position at left wing back, because he has done it for England, and he's the one player of those fullbacks at the moment that you'd say, if they are all fit, he's the one you'd look at and say he can probably do it, because he has done it.
Alvaro Fernandez as well is probably a name to consider. I mean, he's one who we've discussed more recently because of his performances for Benfica, but United have a buyback clause there. He's definitely one to keep in mind, isn't he? He would really fit that kind of role, you'd think, from what we've seen of him and from what we're seeing at Benfica as well. So, one to keep an eye on. We'll leave it there then, Ty. An exciting week it should be, because Amorim is arriving. Hopefully, he's on grass sooner rather than later. Me and you are going across to the under-21s game tomorrow night, and wouldn't usually send two to the under-21s, would we? But we're hoping we're going to see Tyrone Marshall there, and maybe an appearance from Amorim as well. So that'd be exciting if that happens.
That'd be good.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for your time, Ty, as usual.
No problem. Thanks, Stephen.
And thanks to listeners. We'll be back later in the week to record another episode. Take care.